Good morning, all of you. Namaste. Welcome to Bangalore, who have come from other parts of India. Welcome to India, who have come from other countries. It's so wonderful to see all of you here together from so many different places. And it's a moment of personal pleasure for me and for my colleagues. Well, last evening, in an informal discussion, Professor Bhaumik remarked that he looks within at least twice a day. I think it is this reflective quality of consciousness that makes it most exciting and perhaps most evasive for the intellectual history of the humankind in the recent times. Through the 3 days of the conference, we will be discussing 3 major questions in the area of consciousness studies, to put it broadly. First day, which is today, I think one of our major questions would be how neural processes and physical laws are related to different functions of consciousness. The second day, I think one of the major questions would be, are we unique? Are humans unique in having the abilities to cognize and have sophisticated cognitive abilities? Third day, which is going to be my favorite day, how is our self and identity going to be construed, and what are its implications for human health and well-being? My colleagues, Professor B.V. Srikantan and Professor Anindya Sinha, will be leading the day and the concept themes for today and tomorrow. The invited lectures aside, we will have over 30 poster presentations from young students, postdocs, and faculty members from India and from outside. We will have ample time for discussion and informal meetings and chats. Friends, it's winter time with shorter days. But these 3 days of conference are going to be long. But may I remind you that we will keep time, we will follow time, and so in advance, may I request your cooperation for doing that. In case you wouldn't get an opportunity to share your question or comment after a lecture, there's a box kept outside and a piece of paper where you can write in your comment or question and deposit inside. The answer would come to you at least by email, if not in person. My dear friends, and all the esteemed speakers and distinguished guests, we start an exciting journey today. And this is a journey inward, looking within. So let me not travel between you and the best to catch. Let me invite our director, Dr. V.S. Ramamurthy, for the formal welcome address. Sir.
Professor Satish Chandra, distinguished participants in this workshop, good morning to all of you. Let me join Professor Sangeeta Menon in welcoming you all to this conference, Looking Within Interdisciplinary Approaches to Consciousness. I'm told this meeting is the 5th of this kind that NIAS has been organizing on the subject of consciousness during the last 2 decades or so. The very enthusiastic response that we have received for this conference from across the globe is also very heartening, with more than 125 registered participants. In fact, I had given them the go-ahead on the assurance there will be at least 30 people listening to the lectures. So it's certainly a very, very different scenario today. 20th century is often seen as a turning point in our understanding of the material universe. The century started with the belief that the world is all chemistry, atomic structures. You may recall the famous quotation that even a human being is made of so many grams of hydrogen, so many grams of oxygen, carbon and nitrogen, with a few trace elements thrown in. Probably we also believe that, we know how to convert a human being into elemental compositions, but we have yet to learn the reverse direction. It's a question of time. The quick unraveling of the subatomic world at the beginning of the 20th century changed all that. We said that we realized that there is a lot more to learn, and we started looking inside the atom. Well, that at least thrown away or broke away our ego that we know everything. It's only the last few decades that the inadequacies of the conventional physics and chemistry in a scientific understanding of the living world in totality has become apparent. And cognition and consciousness have taken the center stage. Well, the concept of consciousness has always been part of the traditional Eastern philosophy. It's not we are hearing it for the first time. But however, it is only the last few years, decades, that the concept got intertwined with the recent developments in science, hardcore science like quantum physics, neuroscience, etc. Well, you are also aware of the communication gap between the traditional philosophers and the modern scientists. They rarely meet in a common platform, and probably they speak different languages. Not the English, Sanskrit kind of languages, even the language of communication, scientific communication. We also recognize that conscious studies have implications in various planes of human interactions. It's not just a question of curiosity, we understand what it is, but probably even day-to-day things like human well-being, development, we may have a major link with the understanding of consciousness. NIAS has always had an interest in multidisciplinary approaches to consciousness. Dr. Kapoor, you were mentioning Professor Satish Chandra. He's one of the people who started this activity here. Professor Srikantan, who has been talking about this for almost 2 decades now. And as you are all aware, Professor Srikantan is a hardcore cosmic ray scientist. But we have also had problems in attracting young researchers. The youngest in NIAS is, of course, Professor Srikantan himself. He's only 85 now. He's 85 years young. We have a problem in identifying young students who show interest in the recent developments. Even though we are all aware that there are recent developments, for somehow either there is a fear of the unknown, you may say, and fear of the unknown among scientists is somewhat odd, but that's the way things are. Thanks to a liberal grant from the Department of Science and Technology, multidisciplinary cognition studies have indeed a boost in India. Something like 20 institutions and almost 80-90 people who have participated, in which NIAS also plays an important role. And this involves multiple specializations, starting from neuroscience to mathematics. Everything is there. Unfortunately, we are yet to see a similar boost to studies on human consciousness and experience as a single subject. Such a thing does not exist. So money is also a glue. It brings people together and forces them to sit together on the same table and discuss. It's a very good glue, but unfortunately it's yet to come. So hopefully one of these days we will have an opportunity to convince our departments that consciousness is not all anti-scientific. I mean, this is a concept which has been there for a long time and continues in the minds of some people. And if they are in decision-making bodies, you are in a little bit of trouble. We need to bring in science, humanities, arts, social sciences together to understand and perhaps solve the final mystery of our times, the human consciousness. I think that's probably the challenge for the coming centuries for all of us. This conference is a modest attempt by this institute to bring together people, disciplines, and cultures to discuss and debate. So Sangeeta was mentioning how the 3 days have been planned, each looking at a specific aspect of but one thing, consciousness. I'm sure that with your participation and discussions that will take place during the next few days, many areas of research will open up in consciousness. We are not planning to solve the problem. We are only hoping that we will open up discussions, we will open up research in these areas, and with the impact of this we will see in the coming years. I must take this opportunity to specially express our thanks to Dr. Mani Bamuk, without whose initial seeding this program wouldn't have been possible at all. So, sir, I thank you very much for this, and I hope we will continue to work together. I wish all of you a successful meeting. Thank you very much.
We are indeed fortunate to have Professor P. Satish Chandra, the Director and Vice Chancellor of one of the leading institutions of this country and perhaps in the world, National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, to inaugurate this conference and speak to you. He is a well-known neuroscientist and needs no introduction. Professor Satish Chandra.
Professor V.S. Ramamurthy, Professor Srikantan, and friends from within the country and abroad. It is my great pleasure to be here this morning to inaugurate this wonderful conference on interdisciplinary approach to consciousness. I came to know just now that this is the fifth in the row of the conference on consciousness. I was wondering in what capacity I am here to inaugurate such a difficult topic, conference on consciousness. Then I was looking at myself. I'm a neurologist. As a neurologist, we talk about unconsciousness rather than consciousness. And the unconsciousness is very easy to say about. And we know all about unconsciousness, the way it occurs, and how we grade it, and what is its prognostic implications. But the consciousness is not just the opposite of unconsciousness. And it is a very complex subject. So, to understand this, the consciousness and its biological basis is perhaps the most difficult challenges in the contemporary science. From the perspective of neurobiology of consciousness, the term consciousness is one of the most puzzling attributes of mind. It is the ability to extract useful information from the environment and the manner in which the information is integrated to generate a useful reaction and behavior. Consciousness, I quote Swami Ranganathanandaji, the recognition of the significance of self-awareness and ego, and the self-awareness has become the focus of higher faculties and powers like reasoning, will, speech, communication in man, and to which the man dominates all the nature. And the nature of the self bring closest to the yoga and Vedanta and the other systems of spirituality. Unquote. The biological basis of consciousness, a critical quest. The science has moved beyond genetic determination now. Substantial progress has been made in understanding of the bidirectional vectors of the influence in linking genes, brain, mind, and behavior. With such research, advances in our attempts to understand the human behavior as well as the pathogenesis of psychiatric disorders, the age-old conflict of the nature versus nurture, the genome versus environment, and which has been replaced by rather a complex concept. Now we talk about genome and environment interaction. This has brought a quest for unraveling the neurobiological basis for the origins of the superior faculty of the human consciousness and cognition and its derangement in the various disorders as the central focus. The significance of this research focus is enormously emphasized in the Science in 2005 in an article by Miller, which mentions that the quest for biological basis of the consciousness is the second most important research issue in the contemporary series. Understanding the consciousness and contemporary research themes. The contemporary perspectives on understanding the consciousness implicate the following quintessential research components, namely cognitive neuroscientific research studies within the paradigm of the neurophenomenological approaches involving the animal cognition research as well as the neurophysics and quantum mechanics based approaches. Indeed, the criticality of these research methodologies is illustrated by the accompanying volume of the literature which has appeared day to day in high impact factor journals now. You may be wondering, what is the role of NIMHANS in the consciousness? I am sure Professor B.V. Srikantan knows about the work of Professor Desi Raju. In the late 70s and early 80s, Professor Desi Raju, the head of the Department of Neurophysiology and a leading neurophysiologist of the country, along with Professor R.L. Kapoor, Professor R.M. Verma from our institute, has started what is known as Project Consciousness. And in these studies, I had to just go on with some of the work which have been done at that time and how we took it in our own institute now, understanding the consciousness. Desi Raju and his colleagues carried out EEG studies associated with meditation, such as transcendental meditation, Brahma Kumari's Raja Yoga meditation, and they reported enhanced alpha amplitude and theta activity as the state effects with some meditation practices. However, they could not observe such uniform changes in alpha and theta activity among all meditation practitioners within and across the different techniques of meditation. That was their observation. They hypothesized that the meditation practice may alter the fundamental electrical balance between the cerebral hemisphere and hence they mediate the individual differences in sensory perception. Subsequently, we have taken up further and polysomnographic studies have been done using the Vipassana meditation practitioners since 2000 at NIMHANS. It is important to note that most of these studies in literature also were to elucidate the meditation-induced changes in brain functions associated with waking consciousness state. However, not much has been done in the sleep state. And there exists, that is also sleep is considered as one of the state of consciousness. Moreover, the human sleep structure is quite stable with a definite morphology. So the question that has addressed by these polysomnographic studies is whether the meditation induces changes in sleep pattern and EEG activity. If so, what would be the underlying mechanism and its relationship to the consciousness? That is the second question which was raised. The polysomnographic studies demonstrated that senior Vipassana meditation, more than 3 years of meditation practice, have distinct sleep architecture with enhanced slow wave sleep studies, enhanced REM sleep states with definite evidence of increasing in the slow wave sleep cycle. There are indicators of the good sleep organization in these people. The sleep structure is quite stable across the age groups between the 30 years of age and to the 60 years of age with minimal changes in the sleep states. Whereas a healthy age match controls showed that the age associated decrease in the slow wave sleep cycle from the one that is 11% in 30 years to age of 4% by 60 years of age. That is a very important observation which has been made. Overall, from the results of these studies, it appears that Vipassana meditation practices helps to maintain proper sleep organization across the age groups. The changes could be attributed to meditation-induced enhanced plasticity events leading to enhanced cortical desynchronization. Additionally, enhanced melatonin levels, that is another important observation which has been made by the scientists working on these Vipassana meditators. This enhanced melatonin levels among the Vipassana meditators was also observed in these studies, and the melatonin is reported to enhance the sleep. Thus, the observed changes in sleep structure and the quality subjectively reported as having had a good relationship with the sleep, and the felt that reflected in the waking state also have been attributed to its positive regulators' role on the neuroendocrine axis. In these polysomnographic studies, enhanced theta and alpha activity during the REM sleep in the Vipassana meditation practitioners was also observed. This enhanced theta alpha pattern, 7 to 9 Hz, along with the delta waves, and also reduced EMG activity during this deep sleep among the long-term transcendental meditators, practitioners, has been correlated with the establishment of witnessing the intersectional consciousness among the long-term practitioners of EM. Then comes the role of cognitive neurosciences. We went from the EEG, then gone on to develop polysomnographic studies, and now we went to cognitive neurosciences. The cognitive neurosciences encompasses the study of neurobiological substrates underlying the cognition. The research approaches in the cognitive neurosciences attempts to unravel the neural substrate of mental processes with an objective to understand the brain origins of the complex psychological functions. This field is an amalgamation of both psychology and neurosciences, with interdisciplinary inputs from the multifaceted specialities. The cognitive neurosciences has become a very important area, and cognitive neuropsychology has developed in our institute. And we had recently the first conference on cognitive neuropsychology as well as cognitive neurosciences to talk about more about this cognition and the neural substrates. Within the paradigm of various cognitive neuroscientific approaches, various functional MRI studies was being done at the NIMHANS, and in the Advanced Cognitive Neurosciences Center at NIMHANS, the fMRI studies have done by Professor Shobhini Rao, who is amongst us here, and also her colleagues have examined the emotional processing as well as the brain correlates of the bilinguistic and multilinguistic people. An fMRI study examining the impact of the education on the brain activation associated with the pleasant emotions demonstrated that in the college-educated subjects, the brain activities were present bilaterally in occipital, frontal, temporal, and cingulate cortices and cerebellum, whereas in the school-educated, the activation was predominantly in the right-sided, in the fusiform, temporal, and also superior, middle, and the inferior, as well as the bilateral cerebellum. And this was also presented recently in an international meeting. Another fMRI studies on the bilingualism, that is examined code switching from Tamil to English, showed activation in the bilateral thalamus area, left parahippocampal area, the left lingual, as well as the right superior frontal and the left medial frontal gyra. And these observations suggested that the code switching requires executive function processes and memory recall without the need of conflict solutions. fMRI research studies have been carried out in our institute by many people, and one of the areas where fMRI studies have been used is in understanding about the various psychiatric disorders, which gives a lot of role for understanding more about the self. The fMRI studies at NIMHANS have examined the brain abnormalities in schizophrenia. An fMRI study done by John B. John and his colleagues, which has been published in British Journal of Psychiatry very recently last year, has shown that the activation and deactivation during the semantic word generation in schizophrenia in comparison with that of the healthy control showed additional activation of temporoparieto-occipital cortical regions as well as the subcortical regions in schizophrenia patients, despite significantly poorer behavioral performance than in the healthy participants. Importantly, the extensive deactivations in the other brain regions during the word generation in healthy individuals could not be replicated in those with the schizophrenia. This was the study which has been quoted extensively in the British Journal of Psychiatry in 2011. There is another fMRI study which has been done by Venkata Subramaniam and his colleagues, who is also working in schizophrenia and especially on the drug-naive schizophrenia and compared with the drugs given schizophrenia patients. And this fMRI studies by G. Venkata Subramaniam and his colleagues, looking at the neurohemodynamic abnormalities during the emotion processing in subtypes at a high risk for schizophrenia, showed significantly reduced brain activation in the left insula, the left frontal, the right cingulate, and the right precentral gyri, and the right amygdala, and the right inferior parietal lobule. These findings suggested that the the neurohemodynamic abnormalities involving the limbic and the frontal cortices could be potential indicators for increased vulnerability towards schizophrenia. This has been published in the Journal of Psychiatry in 2010 by Venkat Subramaniam and his colleagues. Then we will look at understanding the self-significance of neurophenomenology, which Sangeeta Menon was mentioning, which would be the topic for the discussion for the third day. The neurophenomenology has proposed a rigorous method that can profoundly facilitate exploration and analysis of conscious phenomena. And this approach, inspired by the style of inquiry of phenomenology, seeks academicians the articulations by mutual constraints between the phenomena present in the experience and also the correlative field of phenomena established by the cognitive sciences. Neurophenomenology is a supplementary step in the study of consciousness. Though a rigorous method, it advocates the careful examination of experience with the first-person methodologies. It attempts to create the heuristic mutual constraints between the biophysical gap and the data produced by accounts of subjective experience. The aim is to explicitly ground the active and disciplined insight to the subject about his or her experience in biophysics emerges this process. Neurophenomenological studies by Dr. Venkat Subramaniam and his colleagues at NIMHANS have examined the brain basis of alienation symptoms of schizophrenia. As we know that schizophrenia perhaps has the first-rank symptoms, and these first-rank symptoms are Schneider's first-rank symptoms, and this exemplary manifestations of these aberrations. The contemporary international literature has supported the critical role of the inferior parietal lobule for the understanding of the neurophenomenological basis of the self. And the studies examining the antipsychotic nature of the schizophrenia patients at NIMHANS have demonstrated a significant deficits involving the right inferior parietal lobule in underlying the Schneider's first-rank symptoms of schizophrenia patient. This has also been published by Venkat Subramaniam and his colleagues in the British Biological Psychiatry. So how we can understand about the role of self in understanding the consciousness can be through the understanding about the schizophrenia and the schizophrenia first-hand symptoms. Then the second day you have a very important program, and that is with animal cognition. Is the consciousness unique to Homo sapiens? Or the case is there for animal cognition also? In parallel to these neurophenomenological studies examining the neural laws of consciousness in humans, the quest that the consciousness is unique to the humans has gathered the momentum. The studies have evaluated that there is a role for the animals also. And in the animals, we can understand about the consciousness. And understanding the animal consciousness behavior, one can translate that information to the humans. There is a growing evidence that animals share functional parallels with the humans, a human conscious metacognition, although the field has not confirmed fully and it is an experimental parallel. And people are working in this direction. As Professor V.S. Ramamurthy was mentioning, this is an opening to the understanding about the consciousness rather than sharing the information about the consciousness. So the role of animal cognition and understanding from there through the metacognition might help us to understand more about the consciousness. Then there is a quantum theory, the quantum theory of consciousness, which is a promising avenue now. And in this context of these exciting advances, it is important to note that the majority of the contemporary neuropsychological approaches assume that the brain mechanisms will ultimately be sufficient to explain all psychologically described phenomena. The belief is implicated upon the idea that the brain is made up of entirely of material particles and fields, and that all cause the mechanisms relevant to the neuroscience and can therefore be formulated solely on the basis of the properties of these elements. And that is the reason one has to look at the quantum physics and also the mechanics to understand more about the consciousness. And I'm very happy to note that these are all included in the program today and within the next 3 days to talk about the role of quantum physics, the role of neurophenomenology, cognitive neurosciences, and in understanding about the consciousness. So what is the way ahead now? The way ahead is the neuroscience basis of the consciousness. The neurophenomenology-based methods to understand the consciousness need further applications, including the exploration of the individual differences, multivariate differences between the cognitive task conditions, exploration of the specific brain regions, possibly contributing to these observations. Critically, within the novel paradigm offered by the quantum physics, these approaches need to be additionally encompass the studies to describe the consciousness and also the animal cognition. Such approaches, which discusses about the animal cognition, metacognition, quantum physics, cognitive neurosciences, and neurophenomenology, together to look at one important interdisciplinary approach to the consciousness. And that is the way forward in the days to understand. And I'm very happy to inaugurate this conference, which is looking at the consciousness, Project Consciousness, which was started in the institute, in our institute, way back in early 80s. And the way we are in today, there are a lot of advances which has happened. The advances in the field of neuroimaging, advances in the field of fMRI, advances in the understanding of the cognitive psychology, the cognitive neurosciences has developed in a very big way. Understanding these areas with a better technological inputs, I'm sure we'll be very shortly understanding what is consciousness. Thank you very much.
Friends, you would agree with me that this is one of the best starts you would have for such a conference titled Looking Within. When we talk about looking within, one would immediately bring in a philosophical implication, which is age-old. To look within has always carried a philosophical, spiritual baggage. Dr. Ramamurthy, in his welcome message, said that perhaps consciousness has to be accepted more in scientific institutions. Well, my thinking would be that when consciousness is accepted in scientific institutions, it's called as cognition. And when consciousness is accepted by humanities and arts, it's called self. Well, these are two worlds, and definitely we have to try hard to bring the worlds together. And it's always in the meeting place of different worlds that we create meanings. The whole attempt behind this conference is not to have final theories, final statements, and conclusions. I think, as Professor Satish Chandra mentioned, we are only starting. We would only try to open up new spaces, new ways of thinking, perhaps new concepts to formulate, and all this to lead more light into the darker, mysterious spaces of consciousness. Because finally, friends, you would agree with me that anything to do with consciousness will also have to do with our personal identity, our daily living, our capacities to function as a normal person, and finally, to be one among in this whole world and to be sharing all the values, perhaps, which we hold as a human community. We have saved a few minutes of time, and we have tea waiting outside. So let's first start with the phenomenology of sipping the tea and perhaps having a plum cake and asking a few questions, perhaps to Professor Satish Chandra or to each other. Welcome once again, all of you, and I'm extremely thankful to all the speakers who have crossed the oceans to be here, and all other friends who have traveled from different parts of India, catching train, catching flights, late night trains. It's really a great pleasure and privilege to see all of you here together. We start the day after the tea, and Professor Srikantan, who is going to lead the concept for the day, will be introducing you to the theme, and from there on, we start the day's discussion. So let's all join for a tea outside.